I can see participants climbing into the room right now. I don't know how that works virtually, but the participant numbers are just increasing and increasing. So I'll vamp a little bit until I make my official introductions. My name is Elena Brokaw. I am the Barbara Bernard Smith Executive Director at the Museum of Ventura County. This is not the museum. This is our guest room. It's very nice. Picture of my child behind my right shoulder. And it is my very lucky job to get to introduce this wonderful evening that we have here tonight. On behalf of the museum, the staff, and the board of directors, we are delighted to be able to host this special conversation. My job is to give you a tiny taste of what these four people who are going to be having this conversation are all about. This just touches the top of the surface, but I will start. So first of all, I am so pleased to be able to welcome Dolores Huerta. Dolores is a civil rights activist and a community organizer. I have to read from my crib notes because it's too much to remember otherwise. In 1962, Dolores and Cesar Chavez founded the United Farm Workers Union. She served as vice president and played a critical role in the union's accomplishments for 4 decades. In 2002, Dolores received the Puffin Nation $100,000 prize for creative citizenship, which she used to establish the Dolores Huerta Foundation. The foundation is connecting groundbreaking community-based organizing to state and national movements, to register and educate voters, to advocate for education reform, to bring about infrastructure improvements in low-income communities, to advocate for greater equality for the LGBT community, and to create strong leadership development. In 2012, President Barack Obama bestowed Dolores with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. So let's just take a moment for the applause that would normally be there if we were all live for Dolores Huerta.
Yay!
And it is my pleasure to introduce Jorge Corralejo. Jorge was born and raised in Moore Park, a local boy, and he began his career working with farm workers in 1965. Jorge picked oranges and lemons and learned quickly how immigrant workers were treated. He worked for Egg City and became a vocal advocate of the farm workers while still in high school. Jorge started working with the UFW when they started a strike in Oxnard in the late 1960s and continued supporting strikers and boycotters and assisting in organizing marches throughout his college and graduate school years. He received his degree at UCSB and continued his graduate studies in Boston. Jorge taught at Fresno State University and has been president and CEO of Macondo Leasing Company for the past 35 years. Thank you, Jorge, for being here. David Damian Figueroa. I got it right before, David. David Figueroa is our moderator. He is an artist, author, music and film producer, activist, and nonprofit leader. He is currently part of the senior team of Farm Worker Justice and the former vice president of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, the Latino legal voice for civil rights in America. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
And lastly, one of our own, Anna Bermudez. Anna is a native of Ventura County, like David, has been a member of the museum staff for the past 13 years, and now is chief curator of both the Ventura Museum and the Agriculture Museum in Santa Paula. Anna's expertise is in the culture and history of Ventura County from a multi-ethnic perspective. California art, specifically Ventura County and the surrounding region, and the California School of Painting, and Latino art and artists of California. She focuses on developing and interpreting exhibits, publications, and gallery installations centered on local history, regional art, and popular culture. I am delighted to turn it over to Anna now to start this very special evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, and hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm so excited to be here for this special evening with Dolores and Jorge. I was asked by our moderator, David Damian Figueroa, how I put exhibits together. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about that. So as a curator, there are various and sundry ways to decide what we show at the museum. Having been at the museum for 13 years now, I keep a running list of what exhibits I do, what I haven't done yet. And honestly, sometimes it's just an idea that I have, and sometimes an exhibit happens to fall in your lap. And that's what happened in February of 2019. So I sent a text by filmmaker Julio Alcala and Rick Castañero, member of the museum's Latino Advisory Committee, and said, would you be interested in doing an exhibit? There's this gentleman, Jorge Corralejo, who grew up in Moore Park, and he has lots of photographs from back in the day from the UFW. So I was curious about that because we really had never done anything on the UFW. But I'd never heard of Jorge. So we decided to meet. So we met. And at the first meeting that I had with Jorge will forever stay in my memory, because this gentleman came in and he brought bags and boxes of magnetic photo albums with so many photographs from the 1960s and 70s that he had taken during his time with the UFW. And I just cringed because I turned and I looked at Julio, who was there at the meeting along with Rick. And I said, we've got to get these photographs out of these magnetic albums. They're getting ruined. And that was my first thought. It wasn't just, I've got to do this exhibit because it's a UFW exhibit. I thought, I have to do this exhibit because I have to get my hands on these photographs and get them out of these albums. So it was an interesting and daunting task. So I decided to look at all the photographs. Jorge came to visit me downstairs in the exhibits room with my team, and we looked at the collection. And every time Jorge would come to visit, he would bring more and more photographs and artifacts. And I said, boy, this is a daunting task. I don't know how we're going to do this. So I decided to call on the Latino Advisory Committee for help. 3 members of the committee, Dr. Maria Munguia from Santa Paula, Ray Vargas, who had been a former archivist from Ventura, and George Sandoval, who is a local filmmaker. And I said, I really need help. So we decided that we would take on this task along with my staff to take these photographs out of these albums, get the stories behind each photograph, and scan everything for this exhibit. And it was a labor of love. Everyone on that, those 3 people, along with my assistants, met weekly with Jorge, and we were able to painstakingly remove the photographs, sometimes with a business card, sometimes with a dental floss, whatever we had, and rehouse these photographs and other posters and make them exhibit ready. It took us months and months of work, and it was indeed a labor of love. But the final exhibit finally came together a week before we were in quarantine. And unfortunately, we closed cases quickly and left the building at 2:30 on March 13th. And we're hoping that at some point in time, you all will have the opportunity to see this fantastic collection. And I wanted you to know this backstory because it's such a great backstory to know that this didn't just happen to come together overnight. It took us months and months of work to get this exhibit together. And we're very happy and we're very proud that the museum is going to show this exhibit. And we hope to keep it up for several months so that you all can come and actually visit it in person. So that is how this came together. And I'm going to turn it over to David now. David is a fantastic moderator. He's become a good friend. And so thank you, David, for everything. And I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for your work. And thank you to everyone at the museum for highlighting the life of the farm worker, spotlighting Jorge as an activist, and bringing on Dolores Huerta, the great Dolores Huerta. I always say, when I'm in the presence of Dolores, she's heard me say this a gazillion times, but I always feel I'm in the presence of greatness because of the sacrifices and the things that she and Caesar did to really make a better life for those of us that have the kinds of jobs we have, curators, professionals at banks, all that was a result of their hard work. And we are in many ways living the dream. And so I'm so grateful for that. You know, I met Jorge when I was a vice president at MALDEF. And you can always tell the people that are old school, because they're the first ones to get at the office and the last ones to leave. And that's when I would have these conversations. I don't know if Jorge would, you know, I don't know if he remembers it, but you know, I would talk, hi, how are you doing? And that would be the extent of it. And you could see the look on probably my face and his face. You're tired, you know. Nonprofit work and being an activist is pretty thankless. You know, you really have to be called to do it. There has to be something in you that is very unique, and not everybody is willing to do it. But I want to get started with the first question for Dolores. Dolores Huerta, the president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. Dolores is a great friend of mine. I'm just grateful to God every time, you know, because every time I see her, because I've learned so much from her. And Dolores, you know that I collect art. You more than anybody, you know that social justice and art have always, you know, been married in the movement. And this exhibit is about social justice art, the signs, the music that went along with it, the chants, all of it is art form. It's a form of expression. Tell us about social justice art in the movement.
Well, it's a very important part of the movement. And when you think of all of the different aspects of art, whether it be the paintings, the posters, the music, you know, the murals, all of these things that really, not only were they able to, you know, put the movement down so people could remember years and years after the movement happened, but also during the time of the movement, it lifted people's spirits so much. It really made us visible to so many people, because when they saw the art, then they understood what the movement was about. And I just want to say also, I do want to thank everybody here at the museum for doing this exhibit. It's really wonderful because, you know, farm workers are still struggling, even down there in Ventura County, in Santa Barbara County, in Santa Maria County. They are still struggling out there. And I think it's rather courageous that you decided to do this exhibit. While I know that because of the pandemic, it couldn't open up the way that we had planned, but even the fact that we're doing this wonderful Zoom talk today in this webinar, and I do hope that the exhibit will still be there after the pandemic ends, so that people will be able to see it in person. And I want to thank Jorge for being so diligent, collecting all of these photographs that he had for so many years. But yes, art is very part of the movements, and thank goodness for that, because then we can really look at the art and then we can remember, and it brings back that emotional content, because I believe that art, it not only touches the heart and the soul, but it also touches the intelligence of people so that they can understand what the movement is all about.
And El Teatro Campesino was very much a part of that art movement with the actos, and really trying to generate, you know, teach the farm workers, and through these actos as a theater troupe. I have had the honor of meeting and knowing a lot of the folks from that. Jorge, you know, when we're in the middle of activism and you're in the middle of history, there's people that really don't know. They're just going with their heart and they're doing their passion. But you documented a lot of things, which kind of makes me believe that you knew that what you were doing was historic. There was something very unique and powerful about what was happening in the movement, because you have all of these images and you have these writings and everything that's in this exhibit. Tell us why you were doing that. I mean, what compelled you, and what motivated you to do that?
Well,
how did that realization come about, in other words?
David Damian, you're aware, I worked after the closure of the Bracero program in about '65. I worked, they offered students an opportunity to work. And I said, gee, why not? For being 16 years old, 15, 16, why not take a job? So I did work picking lemons and oranges in the fields along with migrant workers. And I also worked at Egg City, the largest egg plant in the world, as well in the summers. And so I had a really good and strong relationship with the campesinos who were working there. So I witnessed firsthand the abuse and humiliation of the campesinos and the treatment, the bad treatment. So what happened was I became an advocate, even in high school, to a limited degree, because people were not necessarily amenable to farm workers. But I internalized what was going on with the UFW movement, and I went to Oxnard, where they had a field office, and I joined with Chuy Villegas and Lorenzo there to do anything and everything that I could to support the campesinos movement, and I did. And as time evolved, I increased my capacity there, joined the strike lines, and the good thing is that I had a camera. So, and I knew it was historic because the Chicano movement was just beginning to grow, and this was very much a part of it. So I said, this served the purpose to take photos of this, and it also helped contain the police and the pro-growers to maintain peace in the fields. So with that, I started taking photographs of the strike lines and the movement, and was involved in organizing marches throughout primarily Oxnard, but occasionally in Moorpark for the Egg City strike, and started working with the union, hell, all over the place, wherever there was something going on during the movement. If there was something in Coachella, went to Coachella, something in Salinas, let it strike, went to Salinas, to the Central Valley. This is how the movement was. So it was a combination of things that occurred. And this was my very beginning. I went on to, I don't want to take too much time on responding, but I published a newspaper and did more later on, but I'll wrap this part up now in terms of how I started this work.
Thank you for that. And Dolores, you know, you and Caesar and UFW and all of the volunteers and organizers, you did work and organize in Ventura, Oxnard, and Santa Maria, and there were strikes. Tell us about what you in our previous conversation, you were talking about the vegetables and the citrus and things like that. Tell us about what the climate was, the political climate, and what you were able to accomplish in that during those times.
Well, I want to say here to the people in the museum that we actually can go back a little bit further because, you know, Caesar started his organizing work with farm workers there in Oxnard. And Jorge, you mentioned the Bracero program. And, you know, but way back before we started the United Farm Workers, we belonged to the Community Service Organization. And we did a farm worker project that was actually financed by Helen Pedotti from Santa Barbara. And so, and the thing is that we were organizing the farm workers to try to get them back their jobs because they had so many braceros that they had brought in that the local farm workers were totally out of work. And there was one historical moment where Caesar got the Department of Labor to come down from Washington, D.C., a guy named Dionisio Morales, who you know, became a famous person there in Los Angeles.
MAOF.
Yeah, and then we had all of the farm workers that were lined up to let him know what was going, because they were literally not working because they had so many of the people, the Bracero program, the people from Mexico that they had brought in. And so we were able to get rid of the Bracero program, Public Law 78, and at that time. But the other organizing work is we had a chapter of the Community Service Organization there in Oxnard. And then one of the other big things that, one of the other big projects that we did in Oxnard was to save the colonia because they were trying to do away with the colonia. They were trying to redevelop it the way that they had done in Stockton, California, where, you know, where I lived at that time. And so because of what happened in Stockton, where they bulldozed all of these people's houses, and it was horrible. It was really tragic. because so many people lost their homes. So because of that experience, we were able to go into Oxnard, and we were able to save the colonia in Oxnard. So this is again part of the heritage and part of the history of our work that we did there in Ventura County. And as you know, we have the colonia there in Oxnard. It's a very historic place, and it's still there because of the work that we did with CSO. And so Cesar then did his first organizing there, as I mentioned, and he actually formed a group of workers there. But what he did, and this is part of the plan, of course, was to turn it over to another union, to the United Packing House Workers Union. Well, when that happened, you know, that group didn't last very long. It sort of dissolved, it fell apart. And I had the same experience up in Stockton, California, where I had organized a group of farm workers also. And then I turned them over to the Meat Cutters Union. And the same thing happened. The group dissolved. And it was because of that experience that Cesar had in Oxnard and I had in Stockton about the same time. But that's when we decided that we had to organize the United Farm Workers. You know, that was where our decision came. So the history of organizing goes so far back. You might say that was way before the Delano grape strike, okay, when all of this was going on. But it was of the experiences that Cesar had in Oxnard and mine in Stockton, that's when we decided to form the United Farm Workers. So that's a lot of great history, you might say, that affected so many, I could say thousands of people in terms of farm workers. But then if we throw in the great boycott, then that would be millions of people throughout the United States. But it started right there in Ventura County.
Well, you know, as you know, Dolores, I grew up in Yuma. I'm a former child farm worker, and we didn't learn about Cesar Chavez in school. And so I think it's not till now that we start to see Cesar Chavez streets and schools, and Dolores Huerta streets and schools, and Dolores Huerta holiday here in California, which is great. But there's a generations of us who didn't grow up on that history. And tell us a story, or you work closely with Cesar, and I'm going to ask Jorge the same. What it was like working with him, and maybe something that you learned from him in the process.
Whom are you asking, David?
I'm asking Dolores.
Okay.
Well, Cesar was a genius. He was very, very committed. He worked very hard. And the fact that he worked, you know, from really sun up to sundown, you know, that kind of inspired everybody to work as hard as he did. You know, so he was just so committed, and always, no matter what happened, he always was very optimistic. And when we had a lot of setbacks, we had people that were killed, you know, but with Cesar, you know, he always managed to look at the prize that we're going to forward to try to get the law to organize, you know, to make it legal for farmers to organize in the state of California. And even when we had people that were killed, you know, in the movement, you know, we would do a 3-day fast, and but the thought of giving up or quitting, that never occurred. That was not in his vocabulary. So it was a really great spirit. And the other thing that, and I think Jorge could probably agree with me on this, the one thing I loved about working with Cesar is that you had so much freedom to do what you wanted to do and what you felt you had to do. You know, he was not a micromanager. I mean, we had so many people working in the union without any kind of a salary, as Jorge knows, and also as Jessica knows. But you know, everybody was just so committed. It was really more like a movement, you might say, than a union. But I think we were all blessed that we knew this great man.
And Jorge, what are your recollections of Cesar, and what did you learn from him?
Well, he was a man of great integrity. The more you were around him, the more confidence and trust you had in him and the movement. So people were really attracted to him because of this integrity that he exuded. And so, as Dolores mentioned, nobody was on salary. He'd send you to do something, no money, you know, no support, and just get it done. So I learned a great deal working with the union, because you go someplace and get the near impossible done with no money and resources and figure a way. And so that was a lesson needed during my lifetime.
That's great. Dolores, I wanted to ask you another question with regards to Richard Chavez, Caesar's brother. He was your life partner. I think it's, I would be totally remiss if I didn't mention Richard and just give us, tell us something about his life. He was a great person. I had the honor of him cooking chicken adobo for us because you told him to cook for me and Jimmy, and it was like, that was such an honor. But tell us about Richard as well. It's very important, I think, that folks know about him.
Well, Richard was a very hard worker, very charismatic. You know, they talk about Caesar being charismatic. I really don't think he was that charismatic. I think he was just so sincere but Richard really was very charismatic.
Yeah.
Great personality, could tell a million jokes. But you know, when you mention Richard, I want to share another scene about Richard. And this is he would tell me that, you know, because they were migrant workers, you know, they went from Yuma to Brawley, and then from Brawley, I think they came to Oxnard. And he told me that Richard told me that when they were kids, you know, when they hit the migrant trail, when their family lost their farm in Yuma during the Depression, because they didn't have the money to pay the taxes, and the bank wouldn't lend them any money like they did to the Anglos, you know, to the Mexican and black farmers. They just wouldn't lend them the money. So they lost their farm in Yuma. And he told me when they came to Oxnard, and they were working in the fields, and they had some really tragic moments. He told me that they were living in a tent. This is Richard tell me the story, and I think they were picking peas. And he said that it would rain, and they were in this tent, and it was so cold. And then he said that he and Caesar would wear the same clothes every single day to school, and the kids were making fun of them. And they said, "Oh, you don't have any of the clothes to wear?" He said, "Oh no, my mother just buys a lot of the same shirts, you know." So these are different shirts, you know, because she, you know, wanted their mother would be, you know, she would make sure that they were very neatly dressed. But then he said that he and Caesar, he said, we had the whole beach to ourselves. He said they would go there to Port Hueneme, and they would run up and down. He said, we had this whole beautiful beach to ourselves. And so I just want to say that, and by the way, before we started the union, you know, Caesar and his wife Helen, you know, they decided they wanted to take a little vacation before they started the union. Guess where they went to have their vacation, okay? They went there here to Ventura County. And
wow.
They spent some time there because he knew it was going to be rough. And so they wanted some time alone with the children before we started this big venture. And I say this because all of you out there in Ventura County need to know that your area just was, I mean, Cesar, that was his soft spot in his heart was for your area.
The flag of the United Farm Workers was drawn and created by Richard Chavez, that process. So just so everybody knows, Caesar's brother is the one that created that. And one day he told me the story about it. It was just, I'll never forget it. And from beginning to the end of how that became. So I wanted to ask you, Jorge, what do you see in all the marches and all the movements, what do you think was the greatest accomplishment that you saw happen as a result of your career as an activist in the farm worker movement? What do you think was like the one thing that just like you said, okay, things are really, really happening?
In the early days, it was about giving the union recognition and the credibility of a union, a legitimate bona fide union. So we organized a lot of marches, and you know, we brought down Cesar, and then Dolores would come, Philip Veracruz would come, Eliseo Medina would come to give recognition to the union leaders. And these are all important to give the visibility. And then we organized one major march by other union members. So we organized all the other unions to come out and stand behind the UFW and the strikes in Ventura County. And they all came out in great numbers, you know, from the OCAW, the teachers union, all of them came out, strong support. We always finished at Plaza Park on 5th Street in Oxnard, you know, with a speech, a keynote speaker, Cesar or Philip or someone else. And then with Cesar, we had one there, and we also had him speak to all of the crowd and all the campesinos at the Oxnard Community Center as well. So it all gave visibility to the union movement, to the boycotts. So it was all meaningful, no matter then whether it was here or in Santa Barbara or the marches. They all reinforced the legitimacy of the union. Now, one of the things is that some of the press did not have the greatest interest. So one of the things I started doing in late 1969, I started publishing a newspaper, primarily for the Chicano community, on Latino issues. And people loved it. People ate it up because there was no news about Raza, with the interpretation by Raza and the writing by Raza. They loved it, and we gave a great deal of publicity to the UFW. We've got some of these newspapers on display here, and it was incredible. So we trained other students. They kept on publishing after I left, after 3 years in Santa Barbara, formed a very progressive student union with a very strongest commitment to the United Farm Workers Union, went to work in Agbayani Village from its very beginning to its completion. You know, Philip Veracruz was there, went to work with him, spend the night there, work hard in the hot summer sun. We recruited people from Ventura County, longshoremen from Oxnard, Tiquerelas, Juan Herrera, students from Santa Barbara, workers from Moore Park, a couple of folks from the Egg City strike to help build Agbayani Village. And at the exhibit here, there's a small wall filled with pictures of the Manongs, the Filipinos that live in Agbayani Village, and the workers that were generating the work at Agbayani Village as well.
Well, speaking of the Filipinos, I was talking about chicken adobo that Richard Chavez made for us in his home. He said that the Filipinos in the movement had shown him how to make that. So that was really a special treat. Dolores, many years back, you were beaten by the San Francisco police in a peaceful protest. And right now, we're hearing a lot about peaceful protests. And you were almost killed. And you were, you succumbed to a lot of injuries. The Black Lives Matter movement today has become a part of our lives. Every time we know, you know, in the smallest of communities, people are going to the street and they're protesting for the disparities, for the police brutality. But it's such a huge movement, and I don't recall in my lifetime there ever being a movement like this. What were some of the similarities between what is happening today and I'm going to ask you this question as well, Jorge. What's happening today and some of the things that were going on when you all were part of the movement in the 60s and the 70s, farm worker movement, Chicano movement?
Well, I believe that there were similar movements in the 60s. You know, you said the Chicano movement, the environmental movement was just starting, the women's movement, and the peace movement. Because remember, people were marching against the Vietnam War, and so you know there were people killed at that time. Also, there were students that were killed, and in the farm worker movement, we had 5 people that were killed. Nan Friedman, this young Jewish girl from Boston, Naji Daipala, a young man from Yemen that was killed in Lamont, California. Then we had Juan de la Cruz, from Arvin, who was shot on the picket line. And by the way, Najee was killed by a sheriff deputy here in Kern County. And then we had 2 more deaths, Rubino Contreras and in Calexico. And the last one was Rene Lopez, who was killed in a dairy. And all of this, of course, was just to get the basic rights that farm workers were fighting for, which is, toilets in the fields, cold water, cold drinking water, relief periods, and the right to organize, unemployment insurance. And it's tragic and here we see now that the disrespect for the lives of people of color. And even since George Floyd was killed, and we had this big movement that has sprung up, that how many Black and brown people have been killed since George Floyd was killed. I can tell you here in Kern County, there's been a number of men that have been killed by police and sheriff's deputies, and Latinos. The majority of them have been Latinos, by the way, and some African Americans. So we know that this is a really big movement that, and hopefully will continue to grow until we can change the conduct of the police. And the movement for racial justice, of course, we know is a big one. And of course, that was, when we think about all the discrimination against the farm workers, a lot of that was based in racism. All of that goes back to slavery, where you want people to work for nothing. And even in today's world right now, we have Proposition 22 on the ballot, where you have these big wealthy people like, wants the guy from Uber that wants all of the Lyft drivers and Uber drivers to work literally for free without being covered by minimum wage or any of the protections of the labor laws that the labor leaders and union leaders have fought and died for, to get the basic things that protect workers. And so, we're in this critical moment now when they're trying to roll back the clock and take away many of the benefits for workers that people fought and died for. So it's interesting that you asked that question, David, because I think it brings us back to this moment that we're in right now.
Thank you, Dolores. And Jorge, please tell us your thoughts on that.
Well, there's a major difference from today and those days, because the Chicano movement had an enormous base nationwide, but the farm was...
Jorge, let me interrupt you for a second, Jorge. Could you just speak up more, please, so we can...
Yes,
yeah, because what you're saying is very important. We want to make sure that we hear you.
All right. The times are different. In those days, the organization is lacking today, but in those days, the Chicano movement was somewhat powerful and nationally based. Plus, the farm workers themselves left their homes, left their jobs, and went across the country and even into Canada to spread the boycott and man picket lines. This made the union go more nationally, more recognized, and even internationally, because in Europe they strongly supported the boycott. That's what it took ultimately to win. When I was on the East Coast, the A&P was the largest seller of scab produce. Their headquarters were in Boston. I did my graduate work at Brandeis University, a Jewish university, and the progressive Jews I had worked with previously, but they were always a core team to get out on the weekends, every weekend in the snow, to boycott A&P. And it's a large movement that we knocked A&P off, and the union had its biggest success after that, because all of the other supermarkets fell behind them, and we had probably the greatest number of contracts right after that time. And it was those marches where Cesar would go, and Dolores, I have pictures of Cesar and Dolores marching in Boston with huge crowds to reinforce the boycott against A&P. And we had marches, we had fundraisers at Harvard Square, building an enormous movement. Now, you don't find that these days, and what can we do to reinstitute that? I worked a measure with some of the farm workers here in Ventura and Santa Barbara counties, and you know, they regret the fact that the UFW these days does not have many offices as they have. But at a 50-year reunion last year of activists from the 1960s last year, we arranged for a meeting between Teresa Romero, the new president of the United Farm Workers Union, along with Mixtecos, Purapechas, Zapotecas, Tirques from Ventura and Santa Barbara counties at a meeting to build a relationship, to build organizations for the future. These are some of the things that are going on, but we need so many more folks to step up and do far more work to build a movement. Look what it took to win just the contracts for the Farm Workers Union. Campesinos living in all the cold cities in the Northeast and the Midwest, away from home, standing in the streets. And if they did it, we certainly can do more of the same. And so this goes on and on and on and on. You know, I worked in Washington, D.C. in the late 70s, advocating for rural Americans, all rural Americans, Latinos, blacks, whites, and the legislators never cared about rural America. So we lobbied for, you know, health, housing, energy, all of these kinds of things. And I learned a valuable lesson there. If you find a legislator who is friendly to your issues, do the work. You do the work, the staff will adopt it, and they will move it. And I remember they started asking me, can I do a budget? I've never said no. I did budgets, and they lift them and put them into legislation. And we got, you know, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars poured into rural America. Cesar would visit me back in DC to find out policy issues and what was going with the group that we were working with. So these are all kinds of strategies that need to be exercised to win this war that we're in, because really, you look at the assumptions today, we're in a war. If we don't step up to fight, it's not good news.
Right. And you know, the thing about the farm worker in America is that they go through so many sacrifices. And I know personally that as a child, we experience homelessness, we experience discrimination, we experience low wages, we experience food insecurity, just so many things. And a lot of those things still exist today. And it's just wrong. It's so wrong in America. I wanted to ask you a question, Dolores, about, you know, for me, this is always important because I'm a big believer, and, you know, I'm a faithful person, but I also, when I was going through trials and tribulations in my social justice career, and at one point, you know, and it was, we went through some very difficult times during SB 1070, that big fight in Arizona when we were at Malta. But a lot of people, the whole issue of immigration. And, you know, it was just very difficult. And so I was going through a very weird time. And Dolores told me, you told me to pray the rosary. Do you pray the rosary? Oh, yes. And so to this day, I pray the rosary in the morning and the evening. But Dolores mentioned to me that, you know, I've always noticed that La Virgen de Guadalupe, Our Lady of Guadalupe, has always been at the forefront of the marches. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about how faith played a role in the movement, and the comparisons of how the marches happen today, and how faith is a part of it or not a part of it. And what are your thoughts about that?
Well, when you're in the kind of the movement that we were in, I mean, faith is what you had to go on. There was really nothing else. And there certainly wasn't any money, as Jorge said. And so this is, you know, you had to have a lot of faith because the struggle was just so enormous. And, you know, all of us were, we might say, like, you know, trying to build something and trying to do something that had not been done before successfully. There had been a lot of attempts, but no one had ever been successful. So having the Virgin present at the front of the marches, and of course we got that from Mexico, you know, because during the revolution in Mexico, they always had the Virgin of Guadalupe there at the front. And that was kind of an important, in fact, it's a kind of a funny story. When we had our March to Sacramento, that one of the farm worker leaders who was very, again, charismatic, a big speaker, but kind of a big guy. And, but he was an avowed communist. You know, he told everybody he was a communist, okay? And so the people elected him to be the leader of the march. But then they said that we had to have the Virgin, and he said that he did not want the Virgin to be at the head of the march. So all of the strikers voted him out. So they elected somebody else to be the head of the march, somebody that would carry the Virgin with them. And so that was kind of interesting, because that is how strong I think the faith of the farm workers is in terms of the Virgin of Guadalupe.
So we always, when I was growing up with my tia in Arizona, we always had John F. Kennedy, where if you can see up there is John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy over here with Dolores, Martin Luther King, and La Virgen de Guadalupe. That was in our house growing up. That was just one of the things that we did. So tell, if you'd expand on that a little bit, Jorge, what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, I would. Yes, I would. You know, La Virgen de Guadalupe has such a strong cultural identity, religious or not. She is there. But the priests were so important to convert, because they had their own audiences, which would bring supporters over to the boycott and to the union. In addition, if you could get a priest to get out on the picket lines, they were great for preventing the violence against campesinos. So they were one of the biggest safety valves that we had, if we could get them out on the picket lines, because otherwise the campesinos were attacked, you know, by thugs and even police. So they were important factors as well.
It was also, you know, to say that we come in peace. It was a great statement.
Yeah.
And
a funny story about the Virgin of Guadalupe. So in Delano, when we had the grape strike in Delano, of course, the farm workers had the Virgin of Guadalupe out there, and the growers went to court to get an injunction against the Virgin. So they were trying to get an injunction that we couldn't have the Virgin of Guadalupe, that our T-shirts couldn't say Huelga, and of course they lost the case because it's First Amendment rights, right? But that was so funny. That's historic, that the Delano grape growers tried to get an injunction against the Virgin of Guadalupe.
So I'm like, you know, we're running out of time here for my portion of it, but I'm wearing this T-shirt. You have you, Dolores. It says The Dream, but the original T-shirt said what? Huelga.
Huelga.
Right. And this is an iconic image. I just wanted to share that with everybody. It's my favorite shirt. Dolores gave it to me, and it's got holes in it, but I thought I'd wear it for today, you know, so it's one of my favorites. But you can get this also at doloreshuerta.org. Shameless plug, but, you know, that's me. But wanted to also mention, before we close, Jorge, I wanted just to say thank you so much for capturing your part of history. We have so many stories to tell in our culture, just amazing stories, and you shared yours, and it's really amazing that you have this exhibit that's all about your experience. I mean, that is to me just the ultimate sort of I rarely see anything. I've only seen that happen with Dolores and the Smithsonian and La Plaza, and you know, so I applaud you for, and I'm very honored to be able to do this, be moderating this panel discussion about an exhibit of your life's work as an activist. Yes, please.
David, can I say something that I think one of the things that, and Jorge kind of alluded to this, that in the farm workers movement, there were so many young people like Jorge, and so many great leaders that came out of the farm worker movement, like Jorge, like Eliseo Medina. You have one of our great attorneys there in Oxnard, Barbara Macri, who was a young volunteer. I think she was only like 17 or 18 years old when she came to work for the farm worker movement. And of course, now she's an attorney there in Oxnard. And of course, Jessica Arciniega, who also was one of our volunteers, and she's an attorney in her own right.
Yes, she is.
So the leadership development in the farm worker movement, I think, is one of the great things that you have all over the United States of America. You have all of these young people that came to work for the movement and then went on to really for $10 a week, and then they came on to have these great careers. And a little fun fact, Jorge, you said that you worked at Egg City. Egg City was the largest egg plant in the United States of America, and it was right down there in Moore Park, right? And my son Emilio Huerta negotiated the contract with Egg City when he was only 21 years old. Okay, so that's kind of a little fun fact that I wanted to share with Jorge.
I have to share something with you on that, Dolores. You know, when they went on strike at Egg City, a lot of workers went on strike, but there was still a lot that stayed in. And a drinking buddy of my brother was the only Latino ever appointed as a supervisor there. He married a woman, all her family worked there, and they stayed in, all their compadres and comadres stayed there, avoiding the strike. So I sat down with my brother and a drinking buddy, and he was a supervisor, married to all this family. I convinced him to come over to join the boycott, to join the strike, and he did. I said, his name was Ed Luevan. I said, Ed, when you come, because the Teamsters were signing a sweetheart deal with Egg City, can you bring a copy of that sweetheart agreement? And he did. They came out, we got the contract, I gave it to Cesar, he sent me a nice letter after that, but we killed him at Egg City. He brought everybody else out with him, we had the sweetheart agreement, tore them to pieces, indeed.
Wow. Dolores, I'm going to close with this question, but before I do that, I wanted to also acknowledge Anna Bermudez, who's the curator for the museum, who, I mean, the curation is like it's just, you have to go there, go on to the website and look up the virtual exhibit. It is absolutely just, we call it's tight. You have to take a look at it. It's so much detail. It really, if you want to be motivated, everyone today is calling themselves an activist, and that's great. But if you really want to look at what it takes to be an activist, look at this exhibit. You can learn so much from it. And while you're doing your activism, be sure to document it, because we are in historic times, and it's always good to recognize historic times. I want to end my questions, and we have like about 30 questions right now that have come through, so we have to, I just set my alarm, my time is up, but I'm going to do this real quick. Forgive me, everybody. Dolores, in our previous conversation, you talked about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and you talked about the role of women in the movement, and they're connected. I wanted to see if you would give us your thoughts on that and closing remarks, and then we'll go into the next portion of our conversation today, which will be the Q&A for the public, which is great.
Well, we know, when we started the union, we actually had a majority of women because it was Helen Chavez, Caesar's wife, and myself and Cesar. So already we started out with the majority of women. And women, of course, the farmworker women have always been in the forefront in the strikes and the marches, and very, very active. I think the one place where, if you watch the documentary Dolores, by the way, produced by Carlos Santana, it goes into a lot of detail about, how we needed to equalize, you might say, the decision-making power, that is where we were lacking. We had women in all of our offices, we had women negotiators, contract administrators running our clinics, running our offices, but the one place where they were missing was on the executive board. And then for many years, I was the only woman. But now, well, before Caesar died, we pretty much had about 40% of the board were women. But then, of course, now we know, as Jorge mentioned earlier, that the current president of the United Farm Workers now is a woman, Teresa Romero. And of course, we are right now, I think, I'm going to say, celebrating at the same time that we mourn the life of Judge Ruth Ginsburg, because we know how much she did for women. And we're also celebrating 100 years of women's right to vote, women's suffrage. So the power of the women continue to grow.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do the Q&A of this presentation, and we will turn it back over to, who am I turning it back over to? Is it
You're going to turn
Denise?
it over, yes, to Denise.
Hi, Denise. Thank
Hey.
you. There's people behind the scenes making all this happen. There's 4 of us on, but there are like a whole team of people at the museum making this happen. God bless you, and thank you so much for bringing this and doing this for us. And I'll leave it up to you all now.
Okay, perfect. Well, this question came in from actually 3 different people. Ana Becerra, Divian Martinez, and Nina Danza are interested in your recollections and memories about the founding of Cabrillo Village and the role that Cesar Chavez played in establishing that housing for farm workers.
Well, I kind of have to take credit. What happened is that they were going to bulldoze the village down, and I was in Sacramento at that time, and they called me and they said that they're going to bulldoze the village. I think we had one of our organizers there, Larry Tramatola, and I told him, I said, Larry, get everybody to stand in front of the bulldozers, okay? Get them to make a line there in front of the bulldozer and tell them not to move, so that they will not be able to bulldoze the houses down. And then I quickly got in touch with at the governor's office there. I think Jerry Brown, I think was our governor then. I got in touch with them, and then they put me in touch with some of the people that were doing the farm worker housing, and we were able to get them involved. All of this happened like within like 24 hours because we were just trying to push all of the wheels and all of the buttons. And so we were able to save Cabrillo Village. You know, it was a kind of a mini miracle in many ways because everybody was just in the right place where we could do that. And we had some really, really great people in Sacramento that were connected with the farm worker movement that were able to make that happen.
Thank you, Dolores. This question's for you, Jorge. Guillermina Nunez Machiri is asking you to share a favorite anecdote from one of your photos in the exhibit so that when people come to visit, you can tell a story about one of the photographs.
Certainly. So, you know, there's so many darn interesting photographs of all the leaders and all the marches, but there's one that I love. It's probably, there are 2 that are my favorites. One, we were hours and hours under the sun trying to get workers to come out, and the police and the grower was out there trying to intimidate the workers, and after hours the workers started coming out, and they all came out, and there's a picture of that in the museum, and the owner trying to convince them to stay, the policeman there were more than 1 car there trying to convince them they should stay there, and they all walked out, and that was a victory for the UFW.
That's a great memory. Thank you for sharing that.
You bet.
This question comes, and it's actually for both of you. What are some of your fears regarding the upcoming election, and how do you foresee the future of your members in that regard?
Well, my fear is that people won't vote. And we know there are 32 million Latinos right now in the United States that are eligible to vote. And but we know that we have a really bad history of voting. And so I think my plea to everybody that is with us tonight, to call your friends, relatives, neighbors, everybody that you know, ask them to call 5 more people, and then ask them to call 5 other people and get them to vote. And we have some important, I'm just gonna do a quick commercial here, commercial for Proposition 15, that will bring in like $12 billion into our school system. When we get Amazon and Disney and all of these big industrial corporations that pay their fair share of property taxes, okay? And it doesn't affect small businesses. And also Proposition 21 here in California, which will allow municipalities to be able to pass an ordinance for rent control. And so these are 2 really important propositions, and we're up against a lot of money on the other side who are out there with their ads and their commercials, which are, I have to say, all lies, okay? Because small businesses are not covered by Prop 15, and homeowners are not covered by Prop 15. Only the big commercial properties that are not paying their fair share of property taxes. A lot of businesses are, of course, but then we have the big guys that have for decades not paid what they owe the state in property taxes. So we got to get people to vote. I think we just have to work very hard So let's hope that everybody votes, and then hopefully things will get better in the future.
If I may share the same sentiments, but in addition, the propositions are funded usually by big money to subvert legislation, and it's really confusing, and they make all kinds of organizations, whether they're Latinos or anything, to get you to vote the wrong way against your own will. So it takes a measure of looking to credible sources where you can go, credible organizations, on how to vote, because so many times you get killed by the banner and vote against yourself. Take caution.
Okay, I have a question here from Carla Ramirez. She wants to know, what words of encouragement and words of advice would you say to the younger generation of community organizers who are trying to work alongside the campesinos here in Ventura County today?
Well, first of all, I would want to thank them for their activism. And I just want to say to them too, that you really have a lot of tools that we didn't have back in the day, because you have your cell phones, you have your Facebook, you have your Instagram, so that you can mobilize very, very quickly. And the main thing is like Jorge and his work that he was doing with the UFW, and myself and Barbara Macri and the rest of us out there, just don't give up, okay? Just keep on going. And if you get a little setback, don't let that stop you. You just have to go around it. But the main thing is keep that commitment out there, because if you're sincere in what you're doing, you will be able to make a difference and make a change. And the other thing is, remember, you can't do it alone. You have to bring other people to help you.
I may say, it's about leadership. You know, there's so little leadership these days. So people have to step into that role in being a leader. And as Dolores says, you have to bring people to help you. Find people with passion above anything else. If they have the passion, they'll get it done. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take one more question. And I want to commit to everybody who has sent your comments and your thank yous and your appreciation of this evening's program. All of these will be captured. We're recording this talk, so this will be made available to spread far and wide. And I know many of you are educators and you want to be able to share these with your students. So the museum will make that available as soon as we possibly can. I want to pick one. It's so hard. There's so many great questions here. This is one that is, it says, where can we find this documentary, Dolores? I think I can answer that because I know that the Oxnard Film Society screened it recently and the museum helped, and you can stream it online currently. We'll send out the link for that one. And Jorge, the question is with your collection, have you donated to the museum? Is there a plan to digitize all of this great content?
You know, that's a great question, because when this came up, I was going through boxes. My gratitude to my parents, they stored everything for myself, my brother, and my two sisters. So I'm really fortunate to have all of these things over a lifetime with them. And I've been giving it some very serious thought, where can these make the most beneficial contributions. And so I know the museum has an interest, so I'll be making that decision very shortly. Thank you for the question.
Okay, well, thank you all. And we will have a postscript of all of these lovely comments and appreciation and share with the entire panel. At this point in time, I'll turn it back over to David.
Okay, I just had one thing I wanted to say, because I always do this anytime I moderate a panel or I'm introducing Dolores, is that I'd like to encourage everyone to log on to www.doloreshuerta.org and learn about the work that they are doing at the Dolores Huerta Foundation. It's one of the most amazing organizations. Since its beginning, I have been a supporter. When I worked in corporations, as an individual, I rally folks because Dolores is celebrating her 90th birthday, 90 years of existence on this earth. Like I said, I think it's one of the chosen people. And Dolores, you know, please say just a few things about, or whatever you want about, the Dolores Huerta Foundation.
Well, thank you, David. Yeah, well, right now we're finishing up our work on the census, and you know, we're doing relief For many of the people that were affected by COVID-19, we've been doing food banks. We're still going door to door for the census. We have till September the 30th to get people to sign up. And this, you know, these hot weather and smoke, our people are out there knocking on doors. We have a great youth group. We're in 14 different school districts, fighting the school to prison pipeline by organizing students and parents and the community. And then, you know, doing our civic action work, getting ready to get out the vote. So we have a lot of different projects that we're doing at the same time. We're, you might say, a multi-issue organization. And so, yeah, please visit our website and pick up on some of the things that we're doing. And we also, by the way, we'll have a voter guide also on the propositions on our website. Like David said, DoloresHuerta.org. And I want to thank you very much for having this wonderful exhibit on the Union and Huelga and the great history there in Ventura County, because people need to be proud and very, very proud of all of the history that you have there. And of course, we have to end with a "Si se puede," everybody.
Yay!
Yeah.
I have one important thing I have to add. You know, the growers are distraught that this exhibit is being held here, so they're withdrawing money. This is something that's important to know because the battle is still there. We need to consider making up for that as well, because history has to be accurate, it has to be inclusive. And by withdrawing their money, they're saying they do not want this part of history included. This is a battle we fought in the 60s to be included in the university curricula. We didn't exist there, but we're battling it again, as you can see. So we need to, you know, support these kinds of exhibits so that history can be accurate and reinforced.
And I just want to add to that, Jorge. I just, you know, and then I think it's very, very important to know that when you're trying to put an exhibit about the truth, it's always going to put someone else on the defense because it's not the story that they want told. And I totally get that. But we're in the process now where we need to do truth-telling, storytelling about Latinos, and that we have an integral part of the building of this country. You know, the Ventura Museum should be applauded for the risk that they're taking to really expose the truth in truth-telling about how and what our contributions are. Jorge's contributions, Dolores' contributions. So I applaud you. And there, you know, right now there was 260 participants. We have 64 questions. Folks, log on to the museum's website. Become a member, become a sustaining member if you want more truth-telling to be told. And the staff should be completely applauded, and we're so grateful to you for doing this, and Anna and the leadership of, you know, the board, the advisory council, all of you to collectively for doing this. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, David Damian. I'm Jessica Arciniega, and a board member, proud board member of the Museum of Ventura County. And I just, you know, stepping back into this role as being a board member, because I felt like as an attendee, I was sitting down at a kitchen table with Jorge and Dolores and just listening to stories, her stories, oral histories, and especially about our county. It was just such a beautiful discussion. And I want to thank you guys, really. I think the comments are reflecting how much people really gained, and people are talking about, you know, a sense of healing and a sense of validation and affirmation, and especially now as we go forward. And your life stories have really added, I think, a lot to folks right now. So thank you, Jorge. Thank you, Anna, for your commitment to bringing these types of exhibits and programs to the museum. And David Damian, you know, thank you so much for facilitating. And Dolores, I'm going to be remiss if I don't do one Viva Dolores Huerta.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Yes. And I can't wait till the museum, you know, is able to open, and we know that we're planning that time and to make it safe and to follow protocols and guidelines so that we can enjoy this great history that is an integral part of our community. So I just want to talk a little bit about that, you know, the museum and what you can do. All of you tonight, thank you so much for participating, listening, sharing your questions, the animo, the energy. You know, this is your Museum of Ventura County, and your continued support through a lot of different means is going to continue us being able to bring this type of new programming and important programming. So please find a way. There are many ways to participate. You can become a member of the museum. You can follow the museum on Instagram, on Facebook. The Agricultural Museum also has a page. A lot of the things that have been happening since the COVID lockdowns have been virtual. There's been virtual field trips presented. We've had learning modules for families at home, for school children in schools, quizzes, videos. We're also documenting the rapid response collecting, it's called, which is like in time collecting histories about ongoing events. And so that's part of what we're doing. And also in the Ventura County Reporter this week, you'll see a front page article about an outdoor exhibit at the museum's patio, which I highly encourage you to attend, as well as the Ventura Botanical Garden. It's a joint exhibit, I guess you could say, in that you can see some of the structures or sculptures there and some at the museum's patio. So we just want to invite you to feel a part of the Museum of Ventura County and to feel the importance of your contribution to continue to demonstrate and inspire the vibrancy of our community. You can make a gift through your estate planning if you feel so inclined. There's a lot of different ways that you can become involved with the museum and support it. And really, any gift of a financial contribution is greatly appreciated and goes towards the museum's efforts and vision, and your participation on the social media pages and promoting these events and attending these events is also a great form of support. So I just want to thank you all. You know, I'm gonna just hand it back over to Dolores because there's no way that I can just end here. You know, we have to just allow you, Dolores, to close us out, I think. So thank you all.
Thank you, Jessica. And you know, there was one thing I forgot to mention, that Caesar's work that he did in Oxnard, part of his work there when he was organizing was actually captured in a book that was written by Fred Ross Sr. Fred Ross Sr. Was the person who actually got Cecil into organizing, got me into organizing, and many, many other people. And the name of the book is called Conquering Goliath. It's a really, really nice read. And you can get the book from the United Farm Workers, okay? It's called Conquering Goliath. And if you want to follow up this discussion and hear from Fred Ross, getting Caesar to tell him the story about his organizing in Oxnard. So I just want to recommend that book to everybody. And again, I want to thank everybody again with a beautiful, beautiful, wonderful evening. And I'm looking forward to maybe I can go down there and see that exhibit, the outdoor exhibit, because that way we won't be breaking any rules, okay? And definitely looking forward to seeing the indoor exhibit also.
Well, let me know because I want to go with you.
Okay, muchas gracias.
Everybody wants to go with you.
Thank you.